Society is a premier institution in higher education affiliated to the University of Mumbai. Throughout its glorious past years, LRC has played a pivotal role in the field of arts and commerce education, and today the college offers junior college education in arts and commerce and degree programs BCom, BA, and other unaided programs like banking, accountancy and finance, BCom, banking and insurance, BCom, financial markets, BMS, Bachelor of Management Studies, Bachelor of Science, Information Technology, BA in Multimedia and Mass Communication. The college also offers post-graduation program MCom with specialization in accountancy, management, banking and finance, and is a PhD center. The college holds 7th and 9th rank in commerce and arts respectively amongst top 100 colleges in India as per the survey by India Today. Evolving with the dynamic industry environment, the college has realized the need to provide an edge to its students to help them flourish in today's competitive scenario. Alongside the degree courses, the college has also started offering several add-on courses like Certified Financial Planner, Certificate Course on Investment, online add-on courses approved by University of Mumbai, Certificate Course on Digital Marketing, and Soft Skill English Speaking course. I now request the principal of our college, Dr. Debajit Sarkar, to address the online gathering.
Thank you, Dr. Samia Shinde. I welcome all the participants for the today's webinar, and I particularly welcome Dr. Prashant Bansode of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Pune, who is asked, and he has agreed to speak on migrant labours in times of COVID-19, is an important issue in the present time. Friends, we have been hearing a lot of news, watching videos about migrant labor for last so many days. One such report which I came across where a 12-year-old girl who started walking from one of the districts in Telangana along with her family, and she was heading to one village in Chhattisgarh. She traveled almost 100 kilometers, and unfortunately she died when her hometown was just 11 kilometers away. This mass exodus of migrants from our seas certainly has concern over an impending economic crisis. What will happen to industries that are dependent on them for labor? So far, there has been limited assessment or understanding of the implication that the COVID-19 lockdown has had on them. Many more implications and impact will be unfolded in days to come. Particularly more concerned about the children of the migrant families, which are really vulnerable group. Without taking any much time, I request Dr. Bansode to start with his delivery, and the floor is yours, Dr. Bansode. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Principal Sir. Before that, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. Prashant Bansode, who is here to speak on the topic migrant labor in times of COVID-19. As the COVID pandemic looms large, the migrant workers are amongst the most vulnerable groups, bearing the brunt of the crisis economically and socially. What are the implications of COVID 19 on migrant workers? What is the state response towards their plight? These are few questions to ponder on. To shed light on this topic, we have amongst us an expert, Dr. Prashant Bansode, Associate Professor, Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Pune. Sir obtained his PhD from the Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai in 2008 on the title Dalits Assertion for Land, a socio-historic study of landless laborers movement in Maharashtra, 1953 to 1965. Dr. Bansode's areas of specialization are social exclusion and inclusive policy, economic sociology, sociology of social movements, agrarian sociology, lit and tribal studies. Sir has to his credit 3 books, chapters in books, various research articles, papers published in journals, and more than 20 papers presented in various international, national conferences and seminars. He also has to his credit 14 completed research projects and is currently working on the research project Benchmark Survey of Scheduled Tribes of Maharashtra, initiated and funded by the Tribal Development Department, Government of Maharashtra. He is working as a core team member and an expert for designing, monitoring, training, analysis, and writing of the reports of the study. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. Before we begin, very brief note to all the participants. For the question answer session, you are requested to type your questions in the chat box along with your college name and your name. Dr. Bansode will address these questions in the question answer session as asked by the moderator. I now invite our speaker to shed light on this very pertinent issue.
Okay, Dr. Samya Shinde. Uh, Before I start the lecture, I should, thank Dr. Samya Shinde for the introduction and inviting me for this webinar. And I would particularly like to thank the Raheja College principal, Dr. Sarkar, for giving me this platform for sharing my views on migrant labor in the times of COVID-19. So what I'll be talking about is on such kind of precarious state of migration, and how we see this migration in this times of crisis, and especially in this period of lockdown, what it has come to our fore. I'll be particularly talking on the unorganized or the informal sector migrants, because that is the area of my study. And I worked on sugarcane cutter migration and their quality of life at destination and source. That is one of the research which I have done when I joined the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. The second research with respect to labor which I have done is on the female domestic workers and their issues relating to social securities. So these two research, particularly on the issue of labor, gives me some kind of credit to speak on the issue of migrant labor in times of COVID. So what I'll be focusing on is the internal, the seasonal migrants, those migrate for a particular period of time, which is adjusted to the annual agriculture cycle. So this is of both type of migration, rural to urban and rural to rural migration. And the specific character of this type of hiring of labor is a contract driven kind of a system of supply of labor. So what now we see is the problem of reverse migration and its inhuman nature, as described by Dr. Sarkar in his initial remarks. So we've been hearing of such kind of inhuman nature of reverse migration in the media, mass media, particularly, and on television. So this is what COVID-19 exposes is such kind of inhuman nature of migration and the issues related to migrant labor. Now, what COVID-19 has done is that it has made these issues of labor, migrant labor, especially visible to a common man, which was hidden till now. So COVID-19, makes the problem of labor more visible to the common man and to the general public. So what COVID-19 has done, it brings to the fore the realities of labor, which are more horrifying than what it appears on mass media. The nature of precarity of migrant labor is more worse than what it appears also on the media, because we keep on hearing of the cases of what Dr. Sarkar has already given an example, and we've been hearing this over these last 2 months. So there are different type of streams of migration, and as we have seen, there is seasonal migration or internal migration. We also have daily wage earners, those who come into cities and go back to villages, and they already do not have any access to government support. So all of a sudden, they are jobless overnight, and they have to return to their villages. So besides these seasonal migrants, in all of these daily wage earners and the contract laborers in cities have to go back to their villages. So this exodus of going back to villages is more horrifying, as Mumbaikars would have know about what happened at Bandra station, that all of these 3,000 laborers had come, and then there was a lathi charge against these laborers. So we know what kind of precarity that this migration has led to. So how do we see these migration as migration of these laborers as such, and how do we fit into the kind of academic debates on how do we see this migration? Whether they this migration, classical theory talks about migration as a positive positive aspect, or from optimistic viewpoint, whereas Marxian would contradict and talk about pessimism about migration. So we all know about these theoretical perspectives on migration. But COVID-19 especially have forced us to rethink that migration is not positive, and it has reinforced this view that migration is no more positive. It is only positive, maybe it is positive only in terms of gaining an income or an livelihood, but at what cost? That is what COVID-19 exposes, and we are all aware of it. So the new economics of labor migration, which talks about that remittances, migration is basically because of remittances, and therefore it is people for only for income migrate. So this is not the story, or even the social exclusion perspective talk about agency. Okay, there is an agency which is responsible, and they and migrants themselves become an agency for to move from one part to another, and the impetus comes because of gaining income. But Jan Riemann and many others have already pointed out that there are structural constraints, and therefore people migrate. So migration is not only for getting income, but it is a coping mechanism with conditions of poverty back at source source villages. So therefore people migrate, and therefore structural conditions need to be taken into consideration. That is what neo-Marxist approach really talks. And yes, this approach becomes more important in today's times to see the situation of migrants from this lens. So moreover, we should look migration, such type of migration, from the perspective of different concepts which are involved in migration, and not just income. Is quality of life and well-being. So is only income very important in terms of quality of life and well-being? So I have done one study on quality of life of seasonal migrants, sugarcane cutter migrants, which I'll come to that later. So what COVID-19 exposes that what is the horrifying state of the net of social protection of these workers, migrant laborers, when it comes to who is going to give them the net of social protection, or rather who is responsible for giving them social protection. So this COVID-19 and the impact of that, we could see that this is an an outlier which exposes us to the problems of migrant labor. But what happens normally is that the migrants lack the net of social protection, though there are laws made in favor of social protection of these migrant laborers. So I'll be reflecting on the studies which I have done earlier on sugarcane cutter migrants, and reflect on the precarious situation which is a normal phenomenon, and which is more horrifying, and which is more disturbing, and it is continuously disturbing, visible in contemporary time in these last 2 months. So to make some important points about this, to talk about data. There is no official data to talk about the the account of unorganized sector, laborers working in any particular state, for example, Maharashtra. Though the Labor Commissioner has come up with a figure of 3.5 crore unorganized sector migrants or laborers in Maharashtra, but there are different types of migrant or laborers per se in an unorganized sector. The collection of data is or pinning down the numbers of this is a more difficult task, and it is not there on official uh, sides of the government, or especially the labor department. So it may be scattered bit of pieces of information, but it is not available at one particular place to know this. So from my study, uh, sugarcane cutter migrants in Maharashtra are around between 8 to 12 lakhs. Okay, and what are my observations in this study? These are very important when I'm reflecting on today's time. Is that or back to the theoretical orientations which I've just shared with you. So from our study, it was very clear that only 10% of these sugarcane cutter migrants go for additional income, while 90% migrate for livelihood, or it is a coping mechanism to the conditions of poverty back at source villages. So for 10% of the migrants, this situation is manageable. That is, post-COVID situation would be manageable. Because why? Because they go only for additional income, whereas they have a source of livelihood. They have good quality of life back at source, and they have resources to survive on. But these 90% people will not be able to survive, and before them there is a big question about how will they live. And in my study, uh, uh, the comparative assessment of quality of life at destination and source, the quality of life sharply deteriorates at destination. But our observations and interaction with these migrants uh, says that one woman was saying that I asked her that why did you migrate, besides you are facing a very bad quality of life here at destination site. So she said that we come here to live. So that means there are no resources back at source destination source sites, and therefore 90% of them come to live. So reverse migration, and 90% of these migrants, before them, it is a very big question for them in terms of securing a livelihood. So what are the main important things at destination sites which they miss? Uh, what is the better indicator of at destination site? So food security and water source. This is what they get at destination site better than they when compared to that of source. So you could see that migration though is positive in terms of coping with poverty, but these structural constraints of poverty and other conditions make it more vulnerable for them. So With respect to another horrifying state which uh, uh, we have been knowing about these migrants, and especially when you take into the consideration the gender perspective in terms of these migrants. There were reports a year back or 2 years back, and especially before this lockdown, that this sugarcane cutter labor women have to remove their uterus so that they do not miss working days while they menstruate. So you could easily visualize the situation of poor migrants, that they have to force their women to remove their uterus, so that if you see on ground, that the sugarcane cutter worker or a labor or one koita constitute a couple, a man and a woman. So both are hired for this labor work. So you could see the already horrifying condition which is there, which these migrant workers face normally. Okay, and COVID-19 now exposes to uh, story which is again at the surface, which we see, but this is what is happening normally on beneath these reality. So what is going to happen? There is going to be a crisis of food and water at those villages on the one hand. Then inflation is going to go high in the next few months. So there will be no money in the hands of migrants. These migrants especially, as they would not get advance, which they normally get in the month of June. That is the hiring of these laborers for the next sugar season. The sugar season starts from post Diwali, that is in October, and ends in either March or April, or May at and then these migrants come back. So they are hired in the month of June, and they get an advance ranging from rupees 4,000 to 50,000, and much more for one koita. So this advance, uh, if they get, they would survive for till October, and they would buy food grains uh, to take it to the destination sites and use them for 15 days or a month or so. So now, if they don't have advance, I mean, if they don't have security of hiring back as migrant laborers, you can imagine what kind of state these laborers would be. I'm talking about 90%, because 10% people have good sources to fall back upon. So post COVID, what is going to happen? Regrouping with mukadams or the contractors to hire them is going to be very difficult and a risky task for the next sugar season of labor cycle for these sugarcane migrants. So it's going to be very difficult than what we just see on the television. So well, what has the state till now identified, and especially I'm talking about the Maharashtra state. How much workers they have identified, and this data is an official data released by government of Maharashtra, that how many workers they have stranded in the state of Maharashtra, and I'll be quickly talking about these data. Till April 10, 2020, they are saying that they have 3,15,000 workers from 25 states, including Maharashtra, and from some from Nepal, and they were stuck at around 2,531 locations across Maharashtra. Now, of these, 43% are interstate migrants. 43%. I mean, almost one can say half, 50% of this. So most of them are from Bihar, West Bengal, followed by West Bengal, then followed by UP, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and there are 87 workers from Nepal who have made attempts to return to their country. So this is the data which is given, and if you see that how it is spread over different locations. So Mumbai metropolitan region has the highest number. The data is shown here at 849 locations. After that, Pune had 1.9 lakh workers, followed by Nagpur. So what has the state done for them? So under the Atal Ahar Yojana, the Maharashtra government has given them lunch, meals to around 50,000 workers in Mumbai, Thane, Pune, and Nagpur under this scheme. So you could see that there is a very limited way in which the state has responded. There are many reasons for it. So I have said that the Labour Commissioner has said that Maharashtra employs 3.5 crore workers in the unorganized sector. So, but what about the remaining workers? So do we know that had they gone back before March when we announced the lockdown, or what is happening? It is just not even 1% of the workers who have been identified, which are stranded at different locations in Maharashtra. So what has happened to other workers? So it may be 10% of what have they identified. So what happened about the 90% unorganized sector workers? So the state is yet to announce a financial assistance package for the loss of wages suffered by these workers. Now, how are they going to compensate on the loss of wages? How are they going to compute it? What would be the quantum, and what it would be in terms of full month's payment, or is it a partial kind of a payment, which the state or the employer would be going? Nobody has a clear idea on this. So though they are going for the DBTs for the migrant workers or laborers, but this will be only limited to the registered ones. Now there is a registration process for migrant laborers, so or in general workers with different boards. So there is a problem with registration, and from our study, it is quite clear that the registrations are very less of in the unorganized sector with the labor department. So from our study, one study of female domestic workers in Pune city, out of 1,000 female domestic workers households, we found that only 22% of these were registered with the board. Though the board is located in Pune's office, yet the female domestic workers registration is very low as compared to the extent of the domestic workers. So those who are not registered, they are either going to go out of the net of this, packages, and we don't know what is going to happen, because there is a lot of documentation which is required for registration. Or they're going to get the documentation. Now, for female domestic workers, they have to get a letter from the employer that so and so is working in our house as a domestic worker for so and so long. So in this COVID crisis, many of them would allow or would give such a certificate. It's very difficult. That is one requirement. So it is going to be a very difficult task. Though the government has said that it will create a database for registration, so that new registration takes place. But it is a very tedious process, and this also needs entitlements. So again, we have found that most of these migrants, unorganized sector migrants, do not have entitlements. For example, in our study, 40% of the sugarcane migrants were not having ration cards. So you can imagine what could be their situation. Now, what will be the who will have the onus of social security? Is it government or the employer? And will they get employment later? And these are very, very important issues in terms of social security, and also other securities in terms of travel and insurance, which we've been now listening in media. Now, what has the state done so far with respect to the sugarcane cutter migrant in Maharashtra? Now, the chief secretary, says that it is around 1.31 lakh migrants, sugarcane cutter migrants, and their families who works in 38 sugar factories were unable to go to their native, place. Now, the official, data statistics of the sugar commissionerate, talks roughly that there are around 8 to 12 lakh migrants, and there are 194 sugar factories in Maharashtra. So this is the figure only of 38 sugar factories and 1.3 lakh. That is approximately maybe 10% of migrant labor. The chief secretary is pointing out. So what about others? Have they returned before the announcement of lockdown, or what has happened with them? So officially, we don't know what has happened, with the migrants. So the scale is much more, and the onus of social security is also much more than what we see here. Now, procedurally, the managing directors of each sugar company was asked to do the medical checkup, which is good. But this medical checkup is not done by the employer each season. So they are not linked with the nearby hospital, and they do not have the health cards. So why do not they have this? Because this entails a cost, and hence the employers do not undertake this normally. So had the sugar factories having a facility of checkups of these employers, which is their own responsibility towards these workers normally, then this situation could not have arisen. That standing in queue for taking these certificates and then applying for the administration to move to back to the villages, this could have been avoided, and the agony and pain associated with it could have been avoided if normally this could have been the practice, usual practice. But this entails a cost, and hence employers hardly takes this very seriously on ground. So now, due to COVID-19, these sugar mills are responsible for the transport and necessary permissions for the travel of laborers. But normally, they give transport allowance, but which is not enough to cover this whole travel expense. This is the same story as now we would be remembering that the uh, how much of travel expenses would be who will bear these travel expenses. There was a debate. Now Congress came up that this should be given free by the government. So the government responded that okay, we'll make it free. Will give the payment to the railways for their travel. But now the state would give 15% and the center would give 85%. So the state and the centers decision about who will give. So we all know that this becomes who will take the onus. So people try, or institutions also talk about will share these loans, maybe because of the paucity of funds or whatever. So what are the responses towards migrant labor? What have different stakeholders done? So state has announced the package for these migrant workers in terms of travel grant, in terms of duties, in terms of the wages that they would give the wages. So that is a positive kind of an sign. Also, political parties and leaders, we find that they are helping these migrants in their capacities with the food and travel for these migrants. So NGOs are also supporting a lot for these stranded or those who are walking back to their villages. So some employers also are helping these migrants in many ways. Citizens are also helping out to migrants in their own capacities, and this comes as a part of social responsibility or commitment towards society. What sensitive citizens feel more give it as a charity to these people. But I'll tell you, this is a temporary phase of help or giving, which is very appreciable. It is appreciated, okay. But the way ahead, problems of these laborers would be confounded, and after the lockdown, again these problems will go beneath the carpet. So the Interstate Migrant Labor Act in 1979 talks about this chapter 5 specifically talks about wages, welfare and other facilities to the interstate migrant. So this act itself says that registrations is required. Registration need to be done, and only the registrations, when done, the license will be issued. But we know that registrations are not done, and we don't know how these licenses are issued to different employers in working in these interstate, hiring of, these interstate, migrants. So this act, especially talks about, the wage rates and other conditions of, service in terms of equal wages to equal work, and there should be no discrimination on the basis of, wage rates. It specifically talks about a displacement allowance, which normally should, take place in due course. And this displacement allowance, that means people moving from one, source villages to the destination sites. By law, the employers, or here the contractors, especially have to give a displacement allowance that is, which is equal to 50% of, monthly wages, or, rupees 75, which is higher. But, this act was adopted in 1979, so this rupees 75 now would have been hiked. So I especially, I don't know how much is the hike now, but it says that it should be equal to 50% of the monthly, wage which they get as a displacement allowance. So there should be also journey allowance, which needs to be paid by the contractor. So which these sugarcane cutter migrants, get, these, journey allowance, but which is meager, and it doesn't takes care of the full, expenditure of, travel. So it talks about responsibility for payment of, wages, and also, liability of the principal employer in certain cases. And it also talks about the past liabilities. Who is going to take, past liabilities? So even if, this act, we say that to implement, this act in its, spirit, would mean that we would achieve more in terms of, solving the unorganized sector migrant, laborers, if we use particularly this Interstate Migrant, Labor Act. Now, what is, happening at, different destination sites? Why there is being food insecurity even at, destination sites? So why can't normally, this be, happening? So from our study at, destination site, so there is a, provision by the Revenue Department for all citizens, for you, me, and everyone, that even if we migrate for jobs to any other, city other than our, native place, we get a transfer of our ration card for 6 months, and there is a provision. It is a provisional ration card for 6 months. The revenue authority in that particular locality has the right to issue that. So why can't these, migrant labor, get normally the ration cards at, destination sites, so that they can be saved from the food insecurity? We have found in our study that there is the extreme amount of, food insecurity or food deprivation, and especially for women and children at, destination sites. Okay, and these are, very scary, deprivation, and even water, deprivation at, why PDS is not available at, destination sites. So why can't this be a normal, systematic, phenomenon in the context of, the existing laws which we have for, migrants? So had it been, an intense PDS system, then even the COVID, problem could have been, resolved for these migrants, if they could have, got the PDS, available at, the places where they don't have anything to eat, and therefore they are, moving out. So DBT and in this food, provision of, food officially could have, solved, the problem of, these migrants. So, you know, coming back, what is going to happen in, post, COVID, lockdown, period, that it is going to, confound problems in a manifold ways. Now, in cities and in places where the economic activities from which main revenue resources was available, now the economy is going to go down because the unavailability of labor after this reverse migration. And even if we get labor, so whether that labor would be skilled one for that activities, we do not know. And the future of the economy is very suspicious in terms of how they are going to uh, revise this economy in terms of the labor crisis. Now, what is going to happen is that it is going to create a pressure on the rural areas in terms of crisis, because most of these reverse migration, they are going to confound the agrarian issues and their issues related to the agrarian crisis. It is going to confound more, and it is going to stretch to its extreme limit. That is what the Andikar and Kai in their current EPW article, they're especially saying that there should be there is a need for a charter of rights for all migrant workers. So they are saying that the pressure would be felt on the fields of agriculture and allied activity, and there would be an immense pressure on the system that is already broken. So we don't know, and people living in Mumbai, where the contract workers and the daily wage earners uh, keep ourselves going in cities. Now, in next few months, they will not be there for your necessary things. So for you, which you have to do your own work, like for example the newspaper boy or those who deliver milk to us, all of these daily wage workers, one could find the shortage of this in next few months when the economy is going to set in. So we are going to have more problems than we imagine in terms of the economy, in terms of labor crisis. Okay, and on the other hand, inflation is going to go more high, and what the Dandekar and Gai are saying rightly is that the charter of rights is necessary for the working population. Number one is to achieve the right to livelihood, food security, and above all the dignity of labor. So this they say that this could be the guiding principle in post-corona virus phase of India's political polity and the economy. And a failure to address this will lead to calamity. And I do agree with what they say with my own research reflections. The crisis is going to be much more than what we just see on the television and the mass media, as I have elaborated in this talk of mine. So I stop with these remarks, and I'll take some questions. So before ending, I would like to thank Raheja College and Dr. Samesh Inde and Dr. Sarkar for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all on this migrant labor crisis in COVID times. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Prashant Bansode, for your elaborate evaluation of the condition of migrants in the country, especially in these trying times, and the various challenges that the migrant population face. We have a flurry of questions here, sir. We'll restrict the questions during the session. Uh,
Okay.
I'll raise the questions, and sir, you can answer each question one by one.
Okay.
There's a question by Professor Kailas Chavan, Principal, SNDT affiliated Mahila Mahavidyalay, Nandurbar. There's
Okay.
a question: does the agrarian sector have the ability to bear the migrant load?
Does the Can you repeat it?
Does the agrarian sector currently
Mhm.
have the ability to bear migrant load?
No, it is not. It is going to be very difficult. The agrarian crisis is going to confound more. That is what it seems like, because most of these reverse migration will put a pressure on agrarian resources.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is related to another question. Manjusha Patwardhan from Bhavan's College also is raising the same kind of issue, that how to deal with the reverse migration and its impact on the rural areas of India.
Okay, now one of the program which the government of India has announced, that the micro and MSMEs, that is the micro and small and the medium enterprises, they are going to boost these by making finance available for these small and medium entrepreneurs in different areas. So I guess a step in that direction would accommodate the labor uh, 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 in this sector, and that could ease out the pressure on the agrarian resources. I see that is the only possibility, that how that pressure on agrarian resources could be eased out.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So there are a few questions here. There is a question by Ms. Chetna Chavda.
Okay.
She's asking that, is the migration issue during COVID-19 political or economic?
It is basically the economic. Okay, it is the economic. It is sociological, and it is also a political question about whether they would have social securities, and then politicians would start arguing on it, that who is going to give them, who is going to give them securities. So that is a bit of part of the politics.
Yes, related to that is another question by Manisha Madhwa,
Hmm.
who says that, will it be possible for migrant laborers to come back again given the politics? If
No, besides politics, what I feel is that these unorganized sector migrants are being hired by contract laborers, sorry, contractors, and then this regrouping again with the contractor or mukadams is going to be bit difficult and more risky. That is what I've said in my talk. Uh, it is going to be difficult and risky, but it is manageable. It can be managed, but all that has to be set in with some support from the state or the governments, respective governments.
So there is
And
no.
I feel that registrations should be the mandatory criteria for migration back into the cities or at destination sites.
So there's a question by Naria Gaur Gauri from Rizvi College.
Okay.
What will be the after effects of COVID-19 on the economic activity in the absence of migrant workers in cities?
Yeah, that is what I have said. Your deliveries, different deliveries, what we consume right from morning to evening for our necessities are going to be very difficult. And on the other hand, inflation is going to rise more. So the difficulties for even us is going to rise more.
Sir, a question by Santosh Gangude from Patkar College. Uh, he's talking about the recent amendments that have been made in the labor laws.
Okay.
So, what would be the what he's asking for? What would be response on the migrant labor because of the recent labor amendments? Because it's becoming more industry. So,
Mhm.
what will be the effect on the labor?
Okay. So I don't think that they are more pro industry. I have talked about the Interstate Migrant Labor Act. Okay, and it talks more of social securities. And the government has established various boards for various unorganized sectors, like there's building construction welfare board, there is Mathadi Hamal labor board, there is a female domestic workers welfare board. So all unorganized sectors workers have their different labor boards. But the problem with them is of registration to give them securities of all sorts. So if they get enough registration, now the problem is with the trade unions and the mobilization of these unorganized workers. The trade unions are trying on their part to make these registration happens, but they have their own limited resources, and therefore they are not able to help these unorganized sector workers to register them. So the state has to do some proactive, chart out some proactive programs and schemes to do these registrations by their own. Though the labor laws are being amended, but labor laws on the face of it cannot do away with the social securities, even though they may appear to be pro industry.
Thank you, sir. So there's a question by Tanuja Kohli from Chetna College.
Mhm.
If the future policies for migrant laborers involve the employers, would it help to provide better security?
Now only in all the labor laws, the employer is responsible for various social securities. Okay, you take any labor laws and it talks about the liabilities of the employer, and even in case of unorganized laborers, the principal liability lies with the liability lies with the principal employer and the contractor. So the legislations already have the onus of security on the employers. So they are already being protected. They should be protected by the employers, and the onus is kept on them in the laws. The only thing is that how do you mobilize them? How do you use it? That's the only issue.
So, but we also often find that the employer-employee relationships are absent in number of works that are done. So, how do we ensure that? So, for example, a domestic worker right now is not going to be paid or paid. It all depends on the employer, but there is no compulsion on part of the employer here because there is no employment contract. So, how do we deal
Yeah.
with that right now?
No,
Especially,
especially with female domestic workers, that is what is the problem. The If the female domestic workers are registered, okay, then only they will get the the wages from the employer. For example, if we are hiring a female domestic worker, then for the registration, I have to provide a letter which states that she is doing domestic work at my house for so and so years, okay, or 1 year or months or whatever. So then, if the registration is taking place, then the labor department, she would be getting an identity card, and then she can use that identity card and say that this is my employer, and they are responsible for the wages. Okay, even they want do not want to hire her, but in such times, they seek the partial wages, whatever the state issues guidelines. So therefore I said registrations are very important, and especially with female domestic workers, most of them are unregistered, and therefore you see this kind of problem. And I've seen only 20% of them are registered. If they register, then they will get other insurance and scholarship for their children. There are another benefits by the female domestic welfare board. Whereas in sugarcane cutter migrants, there is a tripartite agreement between the contractor, the worker, and the sugar factory. So the onus of social security is on the contractor and more on the sugarcane factory. So that contract is a binding thing till that period for providing social securities to the workers. So the laws are now trying to uh, give some protection to unorganized sector workers, but there are certain procedures.
so there is another question by Sunit Kumar Sahu,
Mm.
who says that how can we create job opportunities for migrant labor in their home state? Because we are also speaking about how agrarian sector is going to get overburdened.
Mm.
So how would we create job opportunities for them?
Now, that is, a very structural kind of an, issue which Indian economy, faces. This is a larger question of Indian economy. Why? Because we have, disparate, development, regional development, and therefore, such kind of migration, that is the pull factor which we see in, cities. So unless we have a decentralized model of development, we are going to have such kind of migration and the issues related to such kind of migration. But the Indian economy, by now, it is assumed that the regional disparities in development are going to be there, and therefore that Interstate Migrant Act and all what they have passed in 1979 to protect these workers. But the only remedy is structural readjustment, that is a balanced kind of a development in both urban and rural areas and in different states, that would solve this problem. But I don't see in near future this is going to happen.
Thank you, sir. Um, I think there are other questions also on the chat room, but I think you've covered most of what are the other questions that have been
Okay.
posed on the chat room. Uh, so, sir, now thank you so much for this very enriching session. I'm getting a lot of messages on the chat room about it being a very interesting, enriching, informative, useful session. And I think the credit, sir, goes to you. Your work in the field as an academician and as a field worker speaks for itself, because what we watch on media is very different from what the situation on the ground is.
Yeah.
So even when we talk about migration as an issue, we've been hearing a lot on the media, but not from people who are actually working on the field with them. So the situation demands better understanding of the migrant workers rather than just on the face of it and then passing generalized comments on it. So thank you so much, sir. Now I officially propose a vote of thanks formally
Yeah.
on.
Before that, I would like to you, Dr. Samya Shinde, for giving me this invitation, and Dr. Sarkar for extending this invitation. It's been really nice talking to all of you.
Yeah, it was
Thank you.
our pleasure. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Uh, on behalf of LS Raheja College, I thank the management of Sadhana Education Society for their constant support, the principal, Dr. Debajit Sarkar, for his vision and initiative to host the webinars. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us this opportunity. Our speaker, Dr. Prashant Bansode, the IQAC coordinator, Dr. Anupma Nerurkar, HOD Department of Sociology, Dr. Nandita Saldana, and our IT staff, Mr. Justin Toscano and Mr. Chandrakant Vichare, for making this live session a success. And last but not the least, I extend thanks to all the participants, which includes faculty from across the country, research scholars, and students. Thank you all for your overwhelming response. We now end the session. A note to everybody: the feedback form, the link will be on the chat room and it will be posted on the WhatsApp group. Please note the link is open only till 6:30 p.m. today. So kindly fill the feedback form. Only those who fill the feedback form will get the e-certificates within 10 days. I once again thank everybody for being a part of this national webinar today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Samya ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the entire organization committee.
Thank you so much, sir. It's all that has made this national webinar possible. Thank you, sir.
It was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.